So, hello everybody. To take a look at our title, we have a lot of things going on here. So we are talking about using itslearning as a hub. We are talking about ownership, consistency, diversity, and even Corona in only 30 minutes. So let's get started, right? So my name is Lasse. I work as a product owner at Copenhagen University College, and I'm responsible for the overall process of the implementation of itslearning, but the whole digital learning environment, including itslearning.
And my name is Nis, and I work as an e-learning and implementation consultant, working closely with Lasse with this learning environment, implementing it towards our users. I've been working with itslearning for about 4 years. And I'm really interested in getting the user involved in the process of implementing, and that will be a lot of things I focus on in a few minutes.
Okay, so taking a look at our agenda, so we chose to divide it into 3 main areas, a very classic Simon Sinek way. So starting with the why, implement a new LMS and IT systems in general. Why is that necessary to implement? And so going to the how, establishing ownership and consistency, ending with a look of what does itslearning as a hub actually look like. I will show you some screenshots and some short videos about that part. And notice that we come from a central department in our organization, and so we are very much aware of that. And so we have been working the last year, of course, with our colleagues, students, and teachers. And so we just want to say, we know that most of you today is like our teachers, and so we want to present in that context, sure. So let's go. Why implement a new LMS? So why not just pull the users to the system and let them roll by their own? Why do we need an implementation process? So at least our experience is that with IT systems that are not deeply implemented, sometimes teachers use the IT systems in very different ways. So not all users maybe know the key features, and as a result of that, the students will deal with the inconsistent and incoherent experience, and so that's not what we want, of course. So that's so much more than a technical implementation, and so when we should design our onboarding process for our teachers and students, of course we need to start with our context, start with ourselves first, so to speak, and so this is us. University College Copenhagen, in Danish, Københavns Professionshøjskole. We are a fairly large institution, a fairly large educational institution in Denmark, located in Copenhagen, the central capital of Denmark, and cities nearby. So we have 23 bachelor programs and a lot of further education as well. And so just to mention a few of our programs, we have the school teacher education, the childcare education, nursing and social work, and physiotherapy. We even have the Danish Sign Language as a program as well. So I want to talk a little bit more about our context, because of course in such a large institution we have of course different cultural aspects to deal with inside. So a classic example is the school teacher education versus the nurses. I mean, the school teacher education usually have like 1 teacher per course in itslearning, and there is a heavily use of the teacher's own freedom of method. And so compared to the nurse education, it's more or less run like a factory. We have like 20 equal courses every semester. So not even the same curriculum. They have the exact same content and the same plans all over in the same semester. So how do we support a lot of different ways of teaching, a lot of different ways of learning designed? That's a challenge, and that's something that we'll try to cover today. And then just shortly, I want to mention that we have been using itslearning actually quite some years, because back in 2018, we had a deal with itslearning for the setup, and we had 2 former institutions, and now we are merged into one. University College Copenhagen a couple of years ago. So we have been using itslearning for our whole institution a little more than a year. So first of February this year, we had all students and teachers onboarded in itslearning, and for all our bachelor programs. Just my final slide before going over to Nis will be this one. And so a little bit more about the context again. So as I just mentioned, we are a diverse institution, of course, and because of that, we have many different needs, of course, and it calls for a lot of IT systems. I think we have a lot of like 150 different IT systems that's needed. But the thing is that we, of course, taking a look to the right side, we want to, at least for the students, have one place to start. For sure, that's itslearning. We want to have a unified look and feel, and we do so by using seamless integration between these different IT systems. So it's very important to have consistency. It's very important to have ownership. And Nis, please take it from here out.
So thank you for that, Lasse. So I want to tell you how we implemented itslearning in this setting that Lasse just described. And we implemented itslearning as a hub. And I think we choose to tell about these concepts of ownership and consistency because we think they were some of the most important things, concepts we used in the implementation process. And I think that's the reason we had quite a big success with this implementation, even during Corona. So first, I want to, let's see, yes. First, I want to talk about what ownership and consistency is, just to get down. So ownership, well, to us, it's as a teacher, having ownership of your course and your learning is really important, because having ownership means that you can work with the system and try to adapt it and use it because you know what your students need, you know the subject matter, you know what's going on in the world, and being able to use the system and work with it creatively gives initiative to actually try to explore the systems, what it can do. And that way you start to work with the system to make it do what you want to do as a teacher. Of course, doing that means that you have you need to make a lot of decisions, and to take the right decisions, you need skills and understanding. So for us in the implementation process, it was really important to provide this skill and this understanding in the right way. And I think a good example of ownership, if you look at the bottom of the slide, there's these Tata trucks which drives around in India. I mean, it's such a good example how a boring truck becomes this beautiful, creative, weird thing when you have ownership. And I think the same thing goes a bit for the LMS, that if you have the ownership of your course, you can really make it interesting and fun. On the other side, we have consistency, because we didn't want things to get too creative. We didn't want teachers to work with the system, but not too creative, because we wanted to have a meaningful student experience in itslearning. And I think we all know what happens if we just every teacher on their own develops their own little thing, and it's just chaos for the students. So for us, it was really important, and we knew from the students that having this sort of ability to navigate through courses over different modules, different semesters, and working with many different teachers, there was a commonality in this. And that their topics, the plans would follow a meaningful logic, that itslearning made sense in that way. And the student could know that important information, they found that in assignments. They couldn't look in mails and messages all the way around. They found it there. And this is also very true for all the different systems we implemented as a hub, that it's really important to get those third-party systems in itslearning and create that consistency. And another thing about consistency, which is really important, is that when you start to develop the same language at a program, and teachers start to work creatively, having that language and working in a systematic way makes it so much easier to find the best ways to do specific things, and then share that, and maybe focus on things that don't work that well, and then get together and try to solve that problem as good as possible. And on the little picture in the bottom, I think New York is a really good example of how consistency in the form of the roads in New York, which are in this grid system, that you know exactly where you are, you never get lost. And it makes it so much easier to discover New York as a city. And I think the same goes for an LMS, that consistency makes it easier to explore and discover. So how did we then implement itslearning with these two concepts in mind? Well, we built the ownership First of all, we started down in this little red button in 2019 by establishing a steering committee going across the different areas and programs of KP. So we had a lot of different programs represented, but we also had administration, IT. So we had a broad representation in the steering committee. And they decided that we should launch in September 2020. So we had about 9 months to do this. And the first thing we did was to focus on establishing the team. And what we did is that we told each program to choose what we called an LMS coordinator. And the LMS coordinator is the most important person at KP at the moment, in my opinion, because these are the guys that represent the program in our work, working with the learning environment. And most often it's just a teacher from a program who knows the subject matter really well, knows the organization of the program, but also have a little bit of understanding of IT. I mean, they don't have to be specialists, but just understand it. And the most important thing about the LMS coordinator is that they speak up. They don't suffer in silence. So if they have a problem, they contact us, we talk together, and we try to solve it. Well, we established a team, and we had a Microsoft Teams room, a chat, where all these LMS coordinators could discuss and talk with us, and we could share information. And we had that team established. We started looking at the next phase, the local adaptation. And here the plan was to build pilot courses. So each program should develop a pilot course. They just work with it, gets hands-on with its learning, and we would target skill development to the needs they had there. And then based on these pilots, we could evaluate and put that into the development of the frameworks, like how should rooms and these sort of things be created. And also these guidelines, which it was a central concept of implementation. How should each program use its learning? So that was the plan. And then the next step was to move on to local ownership, have the classic workshop concept, participate, use support, and these things. But then, of course, Corona happened. So it's just in the middle of March, we had just begun this local adaptation phase. So these pilots never really got off to a good start. The skill development that we planned in coordination with them didn't really happen. Everybody was just scrambling to just put all the learning into an online format to save as many teaching hours as possible. So the steering committee actually let our programs choose, like, do you want to continue? Do you want to postpone this implementation? I mean, it's a big thing. And actually all but one decided to continue. So that put me and my colleague Katrina in quite a pickle, because suddenly the LMS coordinators didn't have the right skills. We didn't really have the evaluation to do the right things. And we had to do the entire implementation online. So what we did was decided to focus on these guidelines, the way that the programs should use its learning, and then use those guidelines to move into an online concept where we did webinars instead of workshops and did all our help online. And I want to focus on these guidelines because I think that's like a really, really cool thing we did that really helped us during Corona and the implementation. And it's also something I want to recommend that if you don't have it at your place, try to figure out if you can do something similar, because it's quite helpful. So what are these guidelines? Well, basically, it's just a slide template. I'm going to show examples in just a second. It's just a slide template covering the central features of its learning. So it's a slide template going through like communication and plans and these things. And then each program got this template and started working with them in cooperation with us. So we had these discussions like, how do you want to communicate? How do you want to build your plans? Is that a good idea? Maybe you should do something else. And they could bring up the different needs they had. And we could then work that into the guidelines. And it also made it possible. So when the program had like, we need this thing with literature, we have to do it in a specific way. For example, the nurses department that Lasse mentioned. Then we could just bring in the library and they would cooperate around creating this slide that would actually document the way they would use literature within its learning. And so these guidelines, they became a sort of baseline of how each program should use its learning. And then we have a lot of focus on, like, if they had a problem with something, they could actually change the guidelines and adapt it and spread it out to the teachers. So all like started working in this communal way and started to get the same language. And we figured out that it was a really good way to get that sort of consistency into itslearning, while at the same time giving the programs ownership of their the way they worked. You just really quickly can show us some examples of this. So here you see the slides, and it's actually just like a picture of itslearning, and then we have the rules that the programs choose, like how do you use announcements within itslearning, and how do you communicate with messages, what goes into messages and what goes into announcement. I mean, it's a really important thing to focus on. And then, of course, we had the planner. How should you organize topics? Like, what kind of logic goes through it? Is it like a temporal, chronological logic, or a more thematica-based? And how would you set up the plans? Like, what kind of rows and columns would you have? What information do you put into these rows and columns? What kind of tools and resources do you use in itslearning? So all these things we went through. And we also put in how you reuse itslearning, because it's such a cool feature in itslearning. It's so easy to copy one room to the next and one plan to the next. But how do you improve on the quality of it? So we tried to talk with that with our programs. So how do you want to reuse? When do you want to like innovate on the content? Who is responsible for it? And we also document the organization, because itslearning is not a closed circle. It's connected to all the other things at the school. So we had to bring in the administration, the library, all the different people, and on these guidelines, we could show whose specific person is doing this on each program. So it makes it much more dynamic to work with the teachers there. So that was quite quick about the guidelines and how we created that ownership consistency. And then the next slide I want to show you is how did we use that to make online webinars. And of course, the plan was to have these offline workshops. You know, all know the concept. We have all the people in one room. It's hands-on. Everybody having a great time, as you can see here. And it's much more dynamic. I mean, you can talk. You can see when people are struggling. You can spot the people that doesn't understand what's happening. And you can really make it meaningful, because you can read the audience and you get instant feedback. And in an online webinar, of course, it's much different because you don't have that sort of same hands-on dynamic feel, and you don't get that feedback in the same way. So our main concern is how do you get hands-on with itslearning? How do you get the teachers to actually work with it? And how do you also make it relevant for the teachers? And what we did, we decided on this synchronous, asynchronous design, where we started out with the first webinar where we, together with the LMS coordinator for that specific program, we took the guidelines and we introduced them to itslearning based on their guidelines, using the words they used, and showed them how they should communicate based on what we decided with the LMS coordinator. Together with the LMS coordinator, we also decided that after the first webinar, the teacher should solve like 5 simple assignments, getting to work with itslearning, just basic things like communicate, the plan, these things, and get their hands on it for a few days, working in the course room. And then we met up for the second webinar, which was more like a Q&A, where they could ask questions and reflect on the pros and cons from the former LMS and these things. And then we just gave them a few tool tips and to give them understanding how different tools worked in itslearning. And what we found out is just that it's actually quite cool to do webinars instead, because you have such a quick setup. You can organize it really quick, and it's scalable. You can have as many participants as you want. You can record it so the users can share the recordings of the webinars as well. The main problem, which we really have to figure out how to solve, is how do we spot the people in the back? Like, how do we take the people that didn't understand what was going on and doesn't know how to work with itslearning? So that was quickly went through how we implemented itslearning as a hub. And I think Lasse, you want to show how the hub looks like?
Sure. So now we've been talking about the why should we implement? We're talking about the how, and it's just mentioned a lot of reasons for why we should do a great process in the implementation. And so now let's take a look on what does it actually look like. So just recapping this, so it's all about creating a seamless learning experience inside and outside of itslearning by giving students and teachers the impression that they're working from only one environment by using itslearning as a hub. So what is itslearning as a hub? So with this simple graphic, we try to explain what we mean. So itslearning is in the very center, and as written to the right, itslearning is the beginning and end of the learning journey, as we used to say. So here we have one of the 6 very important side systems to itslearning, being the literature list, the video hosting, exam approval. I'm going to talk a little bit more about those 3 in a minute. And then we have some dedicated advanced peer review system on the side as well, some dedicated video conferencing system. I'm pretty sure most of you are aware of Zoom and Teams. They have been heavily used last year because of Corona. And then, of course, the Microsoft Suite. It could have been Google, but at our place, it's the Microsoft Suite. So we have these 3 very important systems, and we do some different integrations with them. So let me go through literature list, video hosting, and the exam approval tool. So which shows when you go to buy the product Leganto, because it is like on the top of our already existing system Alma, which is our library resource system. And so the reason for buying Leganto is that we have some great features for our research and development department, especially because they can get some great statistics of the use of specific resources in specific courses and programs. And so they can get a lot of statistics on that. We can do some work with Zotero and Mendeley seamlessly with Leganto. So yeah, we found out we had the need for this product. So what about itslearning? For sure, we want to stay in itslearning, and itslearning is definitely our one LMS. So we realized that we could easily set up an integration between Leganto and itslearning. And so the screenshot here are a perspective from the teacher, and in a second I will show you a video from the student perspective. And so challenge in the last part of the left side. So sure, with integrations, it can be hard work sometimes. Actually, this one was kind of easy to set up, but of course there'll be some work to be done with the rollover mechanism, because there is a great rollover mechanism inside of itslearning, and there is a great rollover mechanism inside of the product Leganto, but they are kind of parallelly synchronized. So at the moment we do some manual work to get it done every half a year for a new semester, but it's not really a big deal, but it's something that we work on at the moment. So I want to continue to this short video and try to show you from a student perspective that I directly from the course, by the menu of the course, I can click literature list here, and then I can get the list from Leganto directly embedded inside itslearning. And so the first resource here, I will try to show you that I can actually see if I can do a booking of this specific resource in a local library, whether the availability, so again here the availability of a specific book, and then I can get these specific chapters of a specific book that my teacher chose to show in this course. So actually we have 3 different systems working together: a PDF repository, and then the Leganto literature list, and then all of that stuff is embedded inside itslearning, and it works beautifully for us to say. So that was the first out of 3 systems that I want to mention here. So the second one is the video hosting. I guess a lot of you are familiar with the product Kaltura. It's one of the world's biggest and best video hosting platforms. And so we were onboarding in Kaltura for half a year ago. And so again, we said, sure, we want to use Kaltura, but we want to embed it. So the students will actually be working from itslearning again. And so why did we need Kaltura? I mean, as a large institution, we had some very advanced video features, and we want to do a lot of quizzing on the videos, and for sure no LMS will actually deliver these kind of specific solutions. So it was a pleasure to set up this integration, and just like the other product before Leganto, we have the integration that you can see from the screenshot up here, that you can actually go to the gallery of the course, and I would like to show you that as a student. in this short video as well. So by clicking that button up here, again, we get this is the product of Kaltura embedded directly in itslearning, and from here we can actually add and remove video content. And so up to the right now, I'm able to click the add button. I can choose an existing video from my video files like this, or I can upload or even create a screen capture just right away and upload it directly to the course media gallery in this case. And then one more thing, directly from the editor in itslearning, and we know that we have the same editor everywhere in itslearning, and that's a great thing. We are able to directly insert, embed a video directly from Kaltura like this. Again, I'll then choose from my list of videos here and just click embed. So you see no need of any specific programming skills or any code here, just right away. And you know, you can do that with YouTube as well, but it's nice to have our own so to speak, own YouTube, meaning Kaltura will do a lot of great work for us, and we can use Kaltura and use itslearning together this way. So the last part, and the reason why I want to mention even one more is because this is this exam approval tool is something that we built ourselves. My great colleague Lars Bo did a lot of work the last year for setting this stuff up, and so why do we need this? It's because we have, like any other large-scale educational institution, we have like a student administrative system for sure. And so we want to do a lot of registration of the students, whether they are allowed to actually go for the exam in the end of the semester. And so that's very common, I guess, at least for higher education. So, but we want to do that from itslearning, but want to use our self-built tool because we have a lot of specific features that we like. So see here in the bottom picture, I'm able to just accept some specific tasks for specific students, and I'm able to say, no, you did not pass, or you see it could be filled out or not filled out, and I can do some specific notes to the right. And for the student, there will be this view. So from the status, we placed this icon via the integration, and for the student, he or she will be able to see whether these tasks are completed. I mean, whether the teacher these are completed, and able to see the other courses that the following, to see if we actually meet these requirements for go to exam. So in this case, itslearning works as a view of this specific tool as well. And I just want to go a little back here. So sure, about challenges, I want to mention that we have at the moment a 24 hours delay of some data from the data warehouse, and this is something that we are working closely together with itslearning to get solved, because for sure we want to present more of a live updated version of this inside itslearning. But again, it's a pleasure to realize that you can actually build parts of self-built stuff inside the learning platform. That's what we like. Okay, so Nis, you wanna go for this?
Yes, sure. I think we're summing up a little bit our presentation here, because as Lasse presented these great tools that we have integrated deep into itslearning. It's so important when you do these things that you really get the user involved in the way that you're supposed to use these things, because they can all be used in so many different ways. And I think this model that we created, where we started here with creating this team of MS coordinators, which we are working with together every day. We work with these people. We can use them to adapt these systems and itslearning to their specific needs. So have this cooperation with that team and test it with a few students, with a few teachers. And then when you have that sort of understanding, you can bring it out to all the teachers in the program and in KP, using these guidelines and using online implementation techniques, and create this local ownership by getting to work with the things and giving feedback to us, so we can adapt both the systems and the guidelines. So, I mean, basically that's where we are now. These 3 steps, the online implementation phase. We implement itslearning as a hub, and we're like implementing these systems more deeply now. So what is the next step for us? And I think the key word is continuous development. We really want to keep this momentum that we created to use itslearning and all these connected systems even deeper, like to really figure out how can we combine them in really interesting ways to create like learning journeys for the student in a unified and seamless way. And also, we really want to get teachers to share these resources with each other, both share knowledge, but also resources, because it just saves time. When you build these digital products, like the page tool in itslearning is a great example of how you can build something and spend time on it, and you can share it and use it in many different courses. So if we get that, we get the teacher to get much more time to work even more with their content and their learning journey. And that's what we really want to do. Yeah, so to conclude in a way, what are the lessons that we learned from this process, and what do we want to like recommend for you guys? And I think the most important one is that really try to get that ownership in your organization. And if you don't have it, you have to take it. You have to insist on participation, because that's the best way to develop a system, to get it like user-driven development. Of course, doing that, you also have to establish some sort of consistency. I'm sure a lot of you have it, but if you don't, just start talking with your colleagues. Try to figure out, like, can we agree on these common grounds, and start to talk about what's the best way to solve these specific issues that we have, and try to get that dialogue going. And then if you can document it, like in the guidelines, the sample we use, try, like, that's a really good way to document it and to get those ideas out. And of course, as I mentioned with online training, I mean, it's really good. There's a lot of things we have to learn to solve, especially to differentiate it, so we can like catch the people that doesn't get it or fall behind in the back. And I think it's a very universal thing in online learning. And I think we did a lot of focus on how we could like establish support structures besides just training, but have places where people could connect with us in different ways. We have these online Zoom meetings where people can just connect and just ask questions about it, which works quite well. And itslearning as a hub, it's really possible, because itslearning is a quite open system. It's possible to get things in there and get it to work properly and create this unified learning experience. But you should be really careful doing it, because you really have to think about the workflow and the way you should put things in, and how the users are supposed to use it, because you can put it in many different ways. So just make sure that it makes sense from a like a user experience perspective, and also don't implement too much at the same time. And then lastly, I think Corona, what we learned from it is that we had to do everything online. We implemented this entire system. Our teachers taught totally online, and it's possible. I mean, there's a lot of things we can do better and a lot of things we can learn, but I really think that it's possible. And I think it's really important to have this sort of focus on ownership and consistency to do it, because that's the way you get the user involved, both the teacher and the student, and us from a central department. So I think that was the last words from us, Lasse. And if there's any questions, I think we can answer some of them now.
There's quite a few questions. Let me just switch on my webcam. So thank you very much, Lasse and Nis. That was really, I mean, there were a lot of great takeaways from what we just presented, especially on taking ownership and having a unified learning experience. So there are a couple of questions based on that, actually, around this unified learning experience. Here's a question. How free were your teachers to follow or not follow the set guidelines that you'd given them?
Well, it was different from program to program. So at the nursing program, they had to follow it. It was like the rule. The leaders decided this is what we had to follow. because they really wanted that like consistency between each of the 10 programs. At the teacher program, it was more recommended guidelines, because the teachers they of course have a more pedagogical didactical understanding of it, and they work more didactic and pedagogical with the content. So they didn't want to limit them in that way. So at the teacher program, we focused a lot on using the guidelines as a baseline. So if you are unsure how to use itslearning and you think it's hard, like follow these steps. So it changed from program to program.
So there's a follow-up to that as well. How much resistance did you face from your teaching faculty?
Actually, not that much. I think it's usually when you implement a new system, you have a lot of people having a lot of critique. And I think what we did, because we had the LMS coordinators, we had quite an early start on how the different programs would take and receive the system. So when we came into the live webinar sessions with the other teachers, I think we could answer a lot of the questions, and we could talk into these concerns they would have. And we most often could have an explanation why they couldn't use it the same way, or why this functionality wasn't there that we're used to. And we also had the LMS coordinator to help us like explain the hard things, so why they decided to go down this path, which the teachers wasn't happy about. So of course we may have had resistance. I don't think it's possible not to have it, but I think if you can try to answer it and be in a dialogue about it, it goes much easier.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things I really liked, the one that really jumped out to me from your presentation, is when I saw on one of your slides that you say itslearning is the beginning and the ending of the learning journey, and we like to consider ourselves as being in the heart of the education. So what feedback have you got from teachers and students, especially with this implementation and the fact that Corona sort of disrupted your plans?
What we experienced was that people coming from the old LMS systems experienced that itslearning was much more unified in that sense, and it was easier for them to get the students into a workflow. But I don't really know how to answer that more specifically than that.
So I can add that we didn't actually do much for the onboarding of the students. We realized that it was very easy when we just gave access to the platform for the students, and it's just another thing to onboard the teachers and educational staff. So it's two different things. And so, of course, we have a lot of guides for the students as well. We have video tutorials and stuff, and we have tutors showing them how to. So it's not correct that we didn't do anything. We did a lot of, but I mean, it is two different kind of processes. And so, Corona or not, I think that part was pretty much the same that we would have done, right? Don't you think this?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So a comment here and a question. Very good presentation. Thank you very much. My question is, how do you see the future of education after the pandemic? And do you see itslearning as a good solution to move forward with?
So if I may, yeah, because of course, I want to talk about the hub thing again, just shortly. So what we realized was that we had a look on the product Zoom for a couple of years before the Corona hit. And so I talked to my boss at least a couple of years ago. Don't you think we should maybe have something like this, like the Zoom product? And he said, oh, maybe one day. And then when Corona hit, then in the same couple of days, we were onboarding all our 2,000 employees for using Zoom. And the day after, all of them had their teaching activities and exams on Zoom. And so what I'm trying to say is that the next step is then to onboard them. To extend itslearning to use Zoom right away. And so what I'm trying to say is that itslearning actually help us in making the integration possible in Zoom as well, if you like to. There will be 2 available integrations of Zoom at the moment, and so it's just merely to activate them and then use Zoom directly inside of itslearning. So yeah, I mean, in a process where you really need to hurry up in a couple of days or in a couple of weeks, then we are pleased with a LMS provider giving us direct access to products like Zoom.
I can supplement that a little bit, because I think definitely learning has changed because of Corona. And a lot of our surveys with teachers and students showed that it was really hard for the teachers to change their education. And I think we feel now that the teachers are very interested in how they can make their learning more asynchronous. How can they use tools in itslearning to give more content, so the student can work with the content in their own pace at home and these things, and then meet up in these webinar sort of flows instead of just having this classic classroom education. And I think during the Corona, it was quite hard to actually do that because so many things was going on. But I definitely feel there's an interest and a focus on it right now, where they really want to learn this. And I think itslearning is very good in the way that it sequences the learning for the students. So when you click for the calendar, for instance, you get like the introduction, and then all these tools that you put in goes into this flow. And we learned that these flows really help the student with the learning. And the learning path tool as well. We have some really good colleagues, Digital Kompetenceløft at KP, which use this learning tool at different programs. And the students' feedback is that they really like this sort of very sequenced, very controlled way that doesn't confuse them at all. So it's definitely things we're going to look much more into creating this learning journey for the students.
It seems like e-learning and self-paced learning are increasing at our organization, and Corona definitely has something to do with that for sure. And so connected to itslearning again, I believe the new look and feel of the planner and what you plan to deliver in a couple of months even, we're looking very much forward to see the new planner, and we want to test it right away before activating it, but it could be great for some of our e-learning stuff as well.
Yeah. So what you said kind of ties in with what we're seeing as well. In recent years, itslearning has become sort of the preferred choice for higher education in Denmark. So that leads me to my next question. Does University College Copenhagen collaborate with other educational institutions in Denmark to get best practices on using the LMS, especially in the higher education sector?
So the question is, if we do so? Yes. Yeah, definitely. So our, so to speak, own sector, that would be the university colleges in Denmark. We are, nearly all of us using itslearning actually, and we have the ability to share content and exporting and uploading for their installations of itslearning. And there's a lot of projects across the sector. IT projects as well. As far as I believe, there'll be 6 projects ongoing for different kind of IT systems, and we have usually the same programs, but there will be differences of our institutions for sure. And for sure, we have some collaborations with a lot of the big universities in Denmark as well. And SDU, Syddansk Universitet, just recently came as a customer for itslearning as well, and we have some great sessions with them as well. So yeah, I don't know if I actually answered the question, but that was an answer.
Yeah, I think you did, because I mean, collaboration is big, and it's always great to get the best practices and how best to use an LMS that works for all institutions. I'm just quickly looking at the clock. We have time for one last question, if you both have time for that. You talked a lot about doing online training, and you also mentioned, Lasse, that you had video tutorials. The question is, we plan to produce video tutorials for the introduction of itslearning for our teachers. Would you recommend this? Why or why not?
So that's a classic question, because you can do static textual guides, and you can do videos. And there will be two different approaches and aspects in doing so. But our experience would be that it's a great thing to have both, but it depends on the depth of what you want to cover. So videos it will be great to say, we have a lot of different things to cover, but if you want to go very deeply to something, then I would prefer a textual, very specific tutorial. So that's at least my view. I don't know actually, Nis, if you agree on that. It's very much your field as well.
Well, I actually totally agree with you, Lasse. I think we used videos to like give the broad impression of the system, to like just examples, go through it quickly, just in general. Then we had tutorials supporting that video. In Kaltura, you had the possibility to link inside the video, so we could link to the tutorials, like going into depth with each of the different chapters of the video. So I think ours was like 6-7 minutes long, introducing itslearning, and then linking to the preferred tutorials. I think that worked quite well.
And then it's very classic, but very important. Very, very, very short videos, and do a lot of videos, because when you want to change stuff, it's really a nightmare if you want to change a 10-minute long video and there's nobody want to watch 10-minute videos. So just do 1 or 2 or 3 minutes and just be very accurate. What is the exact one point that you want to show in this video, and then do another video tonight instead.
All right, I think we've come to the end of this session. Thank you both very much. That was a really, really interesting session on your implementation, and we wish you all the success.